What if I told you that there is one skill that can change how people see you, how much influence you have, how confident you feel, and even how successful you become? And it's not public speaking, networking, or intelligence, it's storytelling. Now, before you click away because you're thinking, I'm not a storyteller, let me ask you something. Have you ever told a friend about a terrible date? Have you ever explained why you quit a job? Have you ever tried to convince someone to watch your favorite movie? Congratulations. You're already a storyteller. The question isn't whether you tell stories. The question is whether your stories are helping you or hurting you. Because here's something I learned the hard way. The people who change your mind, win your trust, inspire action, and create opportunities are rarely the smartest people in the room. They're the people who know how to tell a story. And I didn't always understand this. In fact, I remember a moment that completely changed how I saw communication forever. I was standing in front of a group of people trying desperately to impress them. I had prepared facts, I had statistics, I had research, I spoke clearly, I was organized, I thought I had done everything right. And yet, as I looked around the room, I saw something terrifying. People were physically present but mentally gone. You know that look, right? The polite smile, the occasional nod, the eyes that slowly drift away. Then another speaker walked onto the stage. He didn't start with facts, he didn't start with expertise, he started with a story. He talked about being 7 years old, standing in a supermarket, losing sight of his mother for just 30 seconds. That's it, 30 seconds. And somehow, within moments, everyone in the room leaned forward. People laughed, people felt nervous, people connected. And I remember sitting there thinking, wait a second, we all just traveled back in time with this guy. We all felt what he felt. That was the moment I realized something profound. Facts tell, stories transport, and once someone emotionally travels with you, everything changes. But here's the problem. Most people believe storytelling is something you do on a stage, in a movie, or in a book. No, storytelling is what happens every single day of your life. When you walk into a job interview and explain who you are, you're telling a story. When you're on a date explaining your childhood, you're telling a story. When you're asking for a promotion, convincing a client, making a friend, building a business, or trying to explain why you matter, you're telling a story. The scary part? Most people are accidentally telling terrible stories about themselves. Think about this. When someone asks, "How are you?" What story do you tell? When you fail, what story do you tell yourself? When you walk into a room full of strangers, what story is playing inside your head? Because the most powerful stories you'll ever tell aren't the ones you tell others. They're the ones you tell yourself, and that's the first lesson. The story you believe becomes the person you become. I know that sounds dramatic, but stay with me. Imagine two people walking into the exact same room. The first person thinks, nobody likes me, I'm awkward, I don't belong here. The second person thinks, I'm curious, I'm interesting, I can't wait to meet people. Same room, same people, completely different experience. Why? Because they entered with different stories. I remember when I first started speaking publicly. My internal story wasn't, I'm excited. It wasn't, I'm prepared. It was, please don't mess up. And guess what happened? Every word felt dangerous. Every silence felt embarrassing. Every mistake felt catastrophic. Then one day, someone gave me advice that changed everything. They said, stop trying to be impressive. Start trying to be useful. That tiny shift created a completely different story in my mind. I wasn't there to prove myself. I was there to help someone. And suddenly I became more confident. Not because my skills changed, because my story changed. So let me ask you something. What story are you telling yourself right now? Are you the victim, the imposter, the person who always gets unlucky? Or could there be another story that's equally true but far more empowering? Because changing your life often starts by changing the narrative. Now here's where storytelling becomes even more powerful. The second lesson is that people don't remember information. They remember emotion. Think back to your school days. Can you remember every lesson? Probably not. But can you remember the teacher who made you laugh? The moment you felt embarrassed? The day something incredible happened? Of course, because emotion is glue. Emotion makes memories stick. This is why whenever someone says, I don't know what to say in conversations, my answer is always the same. Stop trying to sound smart. Start trying to make people feel something. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone asks, how was your vacation? Most people say, it was good, we went to the beach, the weather was nice, conversation over. But what if instead you said, I nearly got stranded on an island because I thought I knew how to read a boat schedule? Now suddenly people lean in. What happened? Were you stranded? Did you survive? The facts didn't create interest, the emotional tension did, and this changes everything about communication, because the goal isn't to transfer information, the goal is to create experience. When people experience something with you emotionally, they remember you. Have you ever met someone who could turn buying groceries into an entertaining story? And have you ever met someone who could make climbing Mount Everest sound boring? It's never about the event, it's about the storyteller. Which brings me to the third lesson. Great storytellers don't tell you what happened, they tell you what it felt like. This was one of the biggest mistakes I made for years. I would tell stories like a police report. This happened, then this happened, then this happened. Nobody cared. Because humans don't connect through events. We connect through emotions. Imagine I told you, I missed my flight. Okay, now imagine I told you, I watched the airplane take off while I was running through the airport carrying a sandwich and questioning every life decision I'd ever made. Which one do you remember? Exactly. Because emotion creates imagery, and imagery creates connection. The next time you tell a story, don't ask yourself, what happened? Ask yourself, what did I feel? Were you scared, embarrassed, excited, proud, confused? Those emotions are the real story. And here's the beautiful thing. You don't need extraordinary experiences. You just need honest emotions. In fact, the stories people connect with most are often the smallest ones. A conversation with your father, a moment of failure, getting rejected, feeling invisible, waiting for a text that never came, because we've all been there. And when you tell those stories honestly, people don't just hear you, they see themselves. Now, there's one more lesson that completely transformed how I communicate, and honestly, this one might be the most important. Great storytelling isn't about being the hero, it's about making the listener feel like they can become one. Think about your favorite movies. The hero isn't interesting because they're perfect. They're interesting because they struggle, they doubt themselves, they fail, they get scared, and somehow, despite all that, they keep moving forward. Why do we love those stories? Because we see ourselves in them. This changed the way I talked about my own life. For years, I thought confidence meant hiding weaknesses, pretending everything was under control, acting like I had all the answers. But something strange happened when I started sharing my failures. People trusted me more. When I talked about feeling insecure before speaking, people listened. When I shared stories about embarrassment, people laughed. When I admitted fear, people connected, because perfection creates distance. Humanity creates connection. And maybe that's why storytelling changes everything. Because storytelling isn't really about stories. It's about understanding people. It's about understanding that every person you meet is carrying invisible fears, invisible dreams, invisible struggles, and invisible hopes. And when you tell a story that touches those invisible parts, something extraordinary happens. People feel seen. And honestly, isn't that what we're all looking for? To feel understood, to feel less alone, to feel like someone else has experienced what we've experienced. I want you to think about the people you've never forgotten. Maybe it was a teacher, a friend, a mentor, a family member. I guarantee you don't remember them because they had the best facts. You remember them because they made you feel something. They told stories. And here's the secret nobody tells you. Your life is already full of stories worth telling. The time you failed, the time you were scared, the time you embarrassed yourself, the time you succeeded, the time you almost gave up. Those aren't interruptions to your story, they are your story. So the next time you walk into a conversation, an interview, a meeting, or even just talk to yourself in the mirror, remember this. You are always telling a story. The only question is it a story of fear or possibility? Is it a story of limitation or growth? Is it a story that makes people forget you, or a story that makes people feel something they will never forget? Because the storytelling skill that changes everything isn't learning how to tell better stories. It's learning that the story you choose to tell eventually becomes the life you choose to live.